Good morning. We're live at Siftach for Coffee and Kabbalah, Parshat Ki Tavo. We're going to learn the inner, deeper, beautiful messages in this week's Parsha and a little bit about Elul. I want to dedicate this class to a refuah shalema. There should be a split refuah shalema for Shena Chava Bas Rasa Gittel. She should have health and her procedure should go well, and anyone else who needs any blessing for anything should have all their brachos. What? Julie's also? I didn't know. Yudi, but Stacy should have a complete recovery, and obviously Jay Goldstein, I forget. Yes, Yosef Chaim, Aaron Ben Malka should have a complete miraculous recovery. Okay, Ki Tavo, this is such an incredible parsha. So it's really beautiful because it builds off of Ki Seitze, right? Last week we spoke about Ki Seitze when you leave a place, and Ki Tavo is when you come to a place, right? Which is interesting because usually it's the opposite. Usually you come to a place and then you leave a place, right? You don't leave a place until you come, which is very interesting. So we learn a lot of depth about it. We learned that the deeper messages in Ki Seitze was when the aside from when the literal meaning, which means when we go out to a war to conquer land that's an optional war, right? And then we conquer a female captive and the lachos to that. Regarding that, which we discussed last week, we also said that Ki Seitze is the journey of the neshama, when the neshama leaves her space above to come down into this world below to fight the wars that we inevitably fight all the time, etc. And now we're bringing it back. He's like full circle. We're saying when the neshama comes down to this world, after that we achieve Ki Tavo, we return, right? We re-enter this space. We can return. Hey. We can have this re-entering of this space, and that's specifically always read in Elul. So Ki Tavo is always actually read in connection to Chai in the same week as Chai Elul, which is very significant, and it's always read in Elul. And Elul is a time of re-entering our relationship with Hashem, right? It's when we've been distracted, when we've been distant, when we've been apart from Hashem for all year, maybe distracted by life, and now it's our time to just re-enter this relationship, recommit to being in it. So there's a lot to say. There's a lot more about Ki Tavo, but it's interesting that the whole parsha is called Ki Tavo. Welcome back, Anna Karen. Even though, hey, welcome. Hi, Kelly.
Thank you.
What's your name?
It's
You look familiar. You've been here once before?
yes.
Welcome back.
Thank
Hi, Elaine. So we're just starting Ki Tavo. So let me do a quick overview of the parsha. Ki Tavo astonishingly discusses Moshe's last day on earth. This is what Moshe did in his last day on earth. Not the entire parsha, but a lot of it happened on Moshe's last day on earth. So it begins where Moshe instructs us what happens when you enter Eretz Yisrael. The halachos of Bikurim. Anyone know what Bikurim are?
Yes.
The first fruit, right? Giving the gift of the first fruit, taking the choicest first fruit and giving it as bringing it and setting it aside, bringing it to Yerushalayim as a gift to the Kohen Gadol in the Beis HaMikdash, right? That's a gift of appreciation, of gratitude, of saying thank you Hashem for everything that I have. And this mitzvah applies only after they enter Eretz Yisrael, right? Because now they're on the threshold. Moshe's not going to cross over with them. They haven't crossed the Jordan yet. They're about to go in and begin the conquering process. And this is the mitzvah that's going to apply. Then a lot of it speaks about the different gifts that are given that out of appreciation, the different trumais and maisrais that are given, right? Certain years to the Levium, certain years to the poor people, which we still do, right? For a truma and meiser, we still separate the food, and we for the lachos is given in specifically the basket. Then there's the whole nusach of what we say when you give truma meiser, right? Which we do sometimes, right? If we get fruit that doesn't have truma meiser taken from it at home, we say this whole entire nusach that's given in this week parsha. Then there's a lot of warnings of rebukes of Moshe towards the Jewish people. It's all the instructions that once they cross the Jordan, they have to keep all these laws. And then there's all the blessings and curses that were done on Har Gerizim and Har Evel. One mountain of curses, one mountain of blessings. Blessings if they observe the mitzvahs, curses if that will have consequences that will happen if Hashem removes His presence from them. That will eventually happen to them. And then, interestingly enough, the parsha ends with our Maisha kind of recapping the last 40 years and saying that now after 40 years of birthing as a new nation, now you're ready to enter Eretz Yisrael after all that you've gone through. So that is, that's pretty much the end of the parsha. So it's interesting that it chooses, we learn in Chassidus that the name of anything tells us about the essence of it, right? Our name, it tells us about, it connects to our essence. And we see this hinted in the word neshama, that the two inner words, the inner letters of the word neshama are shem. And that tells you that the inner soul of everything is hinted to in its name, or it's drawn through its name, right? A name is not just a name that you have. even though it might seem like a name is just coincidental, it's much more than that. It's given the highest and the energy and the life source of everything is drawn down through the names, through the shapes of the letters of their name. So the name of this week's Parsha is not coincidental. The Rebbe says that the name always tells us about the tochen, about the inner content and the inner meaning of the entire Parsha. So Ki Tavo has a lot of depth to it. Even though, let's just read the first pasuk out loud. V'haya Ki Tavo la'aretz asher Hashem Elokecha nosei lecha nachala v'yirisha v'yishavta ba. It will be when you enter the land that Hashem is giving to you as an inheritance, v'yirisha, and you inherit it, and you take v'yishavta ba, and you settle in it. It's very aliyah focused Parsha. And then the next pasuk says, "V'lakachta b'reishis kol pri." You take the first and choices of every fruit of the ground, and you bring it to the place that Hashem will choose to put His name there, right? The Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash afterwards. And then you bring it to the Kohen, etc. And you say that you've given him the Bikurin, and the Kohen takes the basket, and they have the whole basket waving, and etc. But it's interesting that it says Ki Tavo la'aretz, because when you get somewhere is very vague, right? So first of all, the main mitzvah is Bikurim. So why does it have to mention the entire parsha be called by Ki Tavo when you enter? And also, when do you enter, right? The Mefarshim discuss, it is very vague to say when you get there, text me, right? Let's say I tell someone, text me when you get there, and then 2 days later, they text me, like, well, you didn't say when I got there. Like, when have you got somewhere, right? When you text somebody, I'm here. Some people text them like when they're turning the block. Some people when they're outside, they say I'm here. Some people when they're at the front door knocking. And some people say I'm here when they're inside, right? When they've already entered inside. Some people will, as they're knocking. So when do you say I'm here? When do you send that message, right? It is very ambiguous, it's very vague, and it's different for every single person, right? I'm here, I've gotten there. So it actually has a lot of halachic considerations. When have you arrived somewhere, especially here, right? They need to know practically. It's you're saying when we get to Eretz Yisrael, when do we start the mitzvah of Bikurim, right? Is it right when we get there? And we settle in places that aren't conquered yet, and we start to plant things maybe. Do we then already give Bikurim, or if we're picking the fruit from someone else's tree, right? Or we've begun the conquering process? Or is it later? Is it the second we've crossed over the Yarden? So there's actually a difference of opinion. And the Sifri actually holds that it's immediately when they cross over the Yarden. But Rashi, let me read you Rashi. Rashi says, V'haya Ki Tavo. Then the pasuk, because the pasuk continues, says the Yerishta v'yashavta, that the pasuk says, and that you will settle, you'll inherit it and settle it. So this is teaching us that they weren't obligated in Bikurim until they conquered all of Eretz Yisrael and settled it. Do you know how long that took? Well, they conquered the parts that they were supposed to. Remember we discussed, I forget which parsha, I think it was Al Piha Gorel, that they already divided the land. There was a Gorel that talked, right? Like the first talking Gorel that talked, and it said that this Shevet will settle here. Until today we call this, right, Yehuda and Binyamin. We literally have Ramot Naphtali up north in the Shevet, in the section of Naphtali, Ephraim in his section. It's just incredible, right? We have Yeshuvim that are called after the way that it was divided. So this was already divided a long time ago. They knew where in Eretz Yisrael exactly the parameters of which Shevet will inherit what. And they did conquer all of those nations that they had to finish all the wars that they had to conquer and inherit those territories. So how long do you think it took for them to finish the wars? And they settled, and then 2.5 Shvatim, Reuben, Gad, and half of Menashe went back to the other side of the Jordan. How many? What? 5 years. Great. There's no 40 years. Great. Keep guessing. It's more than 5, less than 40. Yeah. Yoshua led them through the wars. Very close, 14 years. So 14 years until this mitzvah actually applied. But it's interesting because when would you say you've entered somewhere, right? Someone said, when did you get there, right? That's why I call this class, when have you arrived somewhere, right? When is it legit to say, I got there? When, like Mia just made Aliyah, did you get here yet? Not sure, right? It's like, when have you gotten there? When are you just visiting? Like, remember, in my first year of Aliyah, I would say on our last trip here, and I still felt like I was on a trip, like a longer trip to Israel. Like last time we visited, and I'm like, oh, we're not visiting this time, right? We're here to stay. So when have you fully arrived somewhere? When have you gotten there? It's amazing and fascinating that the Torah says actually that the Gemara brings down afterwards. It says that any time you see the combination of words Ki Tavo, not just in this pasuk when it says the Yerisha v'yashavta, but any time it says Ki Tavo, it always means after conquering and settling. Now you haven't actually entered Eretz Yisrael, you haven't arrived until they finish conquering and settling their land, and not only, and then it continues, and there's a machlokas. So Sifri obviously doesn't mean right when they get into Eretz Yisrael, because how could they haven't even, where are they going to plant, right? They're moving around conquering. So he says that from when, let's say they finish the wars, and they've conquered Nachlat Yehuda, right? So Shevet Yehuda has their area. Their women and kids who are not, and all the men, younger men who are not fighting, are settling. They're going to start planting. So do they have to give Bikurim if the other Shvatim haven't settled yet? So actually, the conclusion halachically is that no, until every single Shevet, which took 14 years, has conquered their entire territory and settled in it, and established and settled their, and they've all returned for more, then Bikurim doesn't apply until then. Which to me was so profound, and the lesson from that was just so meaningful to me, because it's saying that you really haven't arrived somewhere and you're not in a place until you're fully settled there, until you're 100% there, until you finish conquering what we need to. And this concept of coming to the land and then conquering it and settling it really does apply to every one of us, right? Eretz Yisrael is a timeless message, right? This, even though we enter Eretz Yisrael, right, we're not doing the conquering process. I mean, most of us are not really conquering Eretz Yisrael now. We're coming, we're settling, right? We're moving straight into our homes, and we're not coming and fighting wars. Nevertheless, it's a message for all of us to say that to acquire Eretz Yisrael, you really do need to conquer it and settle it. That you really don't acquire Eretz Yisrael until you've conquered. There's a lot to conquer. Every one of us, even though we're not fighting the other nations that are living here, we're fighting so much to own Eretz Yisrael, to acquire it, to be present here, and to live here. When you get here, there are battles and battles we have to fight, right? Battles from within, the struggles that we have to live here, the family that we miss, the being far from everything, learning a new culture, dealing with a new bureaucracy, just fighting all of the things that we need to just to be here, financially, emotionally, inside of ourselves, our kids, our chinuch. There's just so much it takes, right, to find your space in Eretz Yisrael. There's so many battles, and until you finish all those battles, right, and until you've really found your place, your chelek, because we learned that every neshama is connected to one part in Eretz Yisrael, has their space. Until you found that, you aren't really here yet. Not in a negative way, but it teaches you how much you really have to do to fight to earn your part in Eretz Yisrael. That if you're not coming here ready to fight, and that's why I always joke that the Aliyah process is so difficult. It's like just like day and night working to fill out the whole nefesh Aliyah process, because if you can't get through that, that's just nothing. That's just a tiny taste of what every day of living here is going to be like, right? If you don't make it through that, then you definitely shouldn't move here. You're not going to make it here. So that's just like the intro class. This is just like the intro, and it should be, right? And it really is. It's a big struggle to live here, and we have a lot to conquer inside of ourselves to earn Eretz Yisrael, right? And Hashem could have just made the nation scatter, but that process of conquering it, of owning it, shows that how beloved Eretz Yisrael is to us, and it shows our commitment, and it also makes us more connected to the land because we worked so hard for it, right? It's not just given to us, it's a land that we worked for, that we yearned for, that we work hard to come for. So every one of us go through this process of conquering, and then eventually, B'ezrat Hashem, we all settle. And for some of us, make aliyah, if you already have your family here, it's a faster process. For some people, they're like 8 years in, and they're like it's still a struggle. They're still not feeling fully here yet. They still don't, every year they're learning new things. They're still not, adapting to the language. It's still hard, right? Some people, it takes 5 years, and they're like, I kept my house in America, my job, just in case, right? Because I didn't feel fully settled. But it takes, every one of us has a time when we feel like we're here and we're fully arrived. And the fact that the beautiful message that I took from this was that the Torah doesn't say v'haya ki tinchal haaretz, right? Or tikavish haaretz will be when you v'tisyashe ba'aretz. It could have just said when you settle the land, then this mitzvah will apply. Then you'll have this mitzvah bikurim, or when you conquer the land. But the fact that it says when you enter the land, when you arrive, when you tavo, when you get there, is very intentional to teach us that you haven't arrived in a place until you're fully there. That teaches us about being somewhere, that you can, and I feel like no generation can relate to this idea more than our generation, to this understanding what the Torah means, that you can be somewhere but not be there at all. That you can be geographically somewhere, that you might have entered Eretz Yisrael, geographically all the Jews are there, but you're not tavo there, you haven't arrived until you've settled there, right? Until you found your space and you finish conquering all the battles, and until all of the nation, until not just you, but until all of Am Yisrael finish conquering their battles and it's found their space in Eretz Yisrael, you haven't fully arrived. And the message is not to tell us that you have to keep fighting. The message is to teach us about what it means to get somewhere. And it's teaching us what it means to be somewhere. That I feel like in our generation, we know right so well what it means to be sitting with somebody and they're physically there, but they're not there at all, right? They're somewhere else. And even 10, 15 years ago, when we had phones, but not smartphones, people were still with you, right? Their phones were just there. But I think every year, for me, at least with every child, I see even more that I could be holding my child, but I'm somewhere else completely. And I see it with each child more and more and more, and it's more sad every single time how much my children, from a young age, already know that the phone is the most precious product in the house. Even though it might be dead, they're just that's the thing that's takes my parents' attention the most from me, right? So that must be the most important thing ever. So you see it more and more that you can be somebody where you can be Kiki Tavo, but you're not there until you've settled in it, until you're fully there. And this actually has a lot of halachic implications outside of this. That there's also a halacha that uses the word tavo, where it speaks about when someone comes to the tent or the home of somebody with tzara'as, whether they become impure. And it says when they come into the tent, so they discuss how much of you in the tent. What if half of your body's in the tent? Or what if most of your body's in the tent but one finger is out? So the halacha is that unless your entire body is in the tent, if one foot or one part of your limb of your body is not in the tent, then you're not considered in the tent and you don't acquire the tzara'as. And the same thing actually applies with mikvah. It says that yavo, when you dip something in the mikvah, it says yavo alamayim, when it enters the water. And the halacha is it has to be fully submerged in the water. And for people who dip in the mikvah as well, we have to be fully, that's the whole point. I'm a balanit. The entire function is to make sure that you see that the entire person is submerged at once, because that's what it means to yavo alamayim. To come in the water means that you're entirely there, every single part of you. If even one hair of yours is not in the water, then the immersion isn't complete. And that's such a profound lesson in life, right? That to be somewhere with another person, to be in any space, in every situation in our life that we're not fully there. We're not considered there unless we're 100% there. With every single hair and every fiber of our beings, we're there. And it's probably the hardest generation to do that, because we're pulled in so many directions by technology, and it's like almost impossible. And without Shabbos, we wouldn't even know what that would feel like, right? To be fully somewhere without this gift of Shabbos. Let me take a break to be here. So Ki Tavo is telling us what it means to be somewhere, and specifically in every single area of our lives, this applies. Specifically in this month, in our relationship with Hashem, what it means to enter into a relationship with Hashem, and not to just be in Judaism because you have a bunch of things that you just do, but really to be in it with all of your being, not just the 1 hour a day when I'm doing Jewish stuff, or the 5 minutes a day when I'm davening and like on Shabbat, but that in every single moment of our lives. And this is one of the greatest teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and Alter Rebbe and Chassidus, is that it really transformed that. It's not like there's holy people and then there's people who are distant from Hashem, right? It's not like there's bakers and simple people, which there was a huge divide in the times of Baal Shem Tov between the scholars and then the simple people who made a living, right, by doing simple trades. And the Baal Shem Tov said, who are you to decide that there's times in your life that you're connected to Hashem and times that you're not, or that it's holier when you're davening and learning all day than when this baker is keeping Torah mitzvos in his mundane life. And he taught that more than anything, we live a synthesized, harmonious life. It's not that there's times when I'm holy and then there's times when I'm just plain and just not holy, not bad, not evil. But every single moment of your life is an opportunity to connect to Hashem. And you can bring Hashem into the most mundane experiences in your life. And specifically in those spaces, it's the greatest connection, right? You don't see the greatest connection between lovers when they're on a honeymoon, right? That's beautiful. But then when they go back to regular life, they can still find that connection in every single moment, in the most mundane things, and shopping together, right? When people truly are in love with one another, every mundane experience, brushing your teeth together, could be so romantic and so beautiful, right? In those beautiful moments. So we learn more than anything that that being fully somewhere, being fully in a relationship means that all of you is in it, not just at certain times, not just in a certain way. And Chassidus really, it says it brought the pnimius of Torah. That Torah is not just external; it's not just in a part of us. We don't just learn Torah with our minds and then go back to acting like however we act. That Chassidus teaches us that Torah has to enter every single part of our being, every single personality trait, into our anger. Right? We can channel our anger, we can channel our jealousy, our passion. Every single fiber of our being should be permeated with our connection to Hashem. It can enter every single act that we do, every single experience that we have. Even something that seems mundane like shopping or taking a walk or having a coffee could be infused with the connection to Hashem. And that's what Chassidus teaches us, that we should bring Torah into the pnimius of our lives, into the most, not pnimius only in spirituality, but even the most physical, practical areas of our lives. And it teaches us that specifically there is when you see the greatest connection. So that's a little bit about Ki Tavo. But to take this even further, we see that what's connection to Bikurim, which is gratitude, right? Bikurim is all about showing our gratitude to Hashem. That really, we know that when we were speaking about the idea of being somewhere but not being there at all, that I can be talking to somebody but I'm not with them, or my friend is with me and I'm like, you're not with me at all. Actually, so it's not just if someone's on their phone that they're not with you. Sometimes a person just scientifically they've shown that even having your phone in eyesight or in arm's reach, it takes a person's attention completely. They're not even half with whatever they're doing, because the fact that their phone is available or they're going to be thinking about what messages they might get or what might be happening, what they might be missing out of. So my father-in-law, who's a principal, actually taught me that anytime you're meeting with somebody, your phone should never be, not obviously not on the table, obviously you shouldn't be using it, but it shouldn't be in the room with you. And definitely if it has to be in the room, it shouldn't be within arm's reach of you, and it shouldn't be visible. Because the fact, if it's visible or within arm's reach of you, it affects you. And also our sleep, right? If our phone is not in our room, we sleep much better than our phone is in our room, because at any moment we can get a message, we might hear something important. So just having that, the availability of having technology already affects our presence so much. And I'm a college teacher as well, and my sister taught me this, my younger sister taught me this many years ago, that the number one rule for marriage is that the phone should never be in the bedroom. Because the message that gives is that you just think like, well, I'm in my bed, I want to use my phone. But the message the bedroom is the space of oneness, of connection. It's your and your spouse's space to connect. It's your space for connection, for quality time. It's just your unique space. And when your spouse walks in the room and the husband or wife is on their phone, the message that it's saying is like, you're not important to me, right? You're not valuable to me, or like, I'm just on my phone and you're walking in. And this, like, it really is the beginning of, like, can be a breakdown of so much trust and safety in a relationship when a spouse is like, at least if the phone is in the bedroom, which it shouldn't be, and then at least when the spouse comes in, to immediately put the phone away. But the message that the spouse gets when he's entering our space, right, where this is our space for connection and the phone is out, is such a devastating message, right? The same thing is when, like, our child comes to us and instead of looking at them, we all know, we've all experienced that. We've come to someone that we love, and instead of looking at us, we're looking at our phone, and we all know that devastating feeling and the message that it gives us. So that that reminds me of a beautiful thought I once heard in the name of, I forget who, some Hasidic rabbi. He said that there's no, this is like the law of relativity, that there's no greater distance between the distance of lovers with their backs towards one another. And we understand that us being somewhere has nothing to do with geographical or physical presence. It has everything to do with our emotional presence and with our focus and with the 100% being there with every fiber of our being, right? There can be lovers in the same bed even, but if they're back to back and they're on their devices, or they're not on their devices, but they're not one, that's the greatest distance, right? And there's no sound, he says, louder than the sound of lovers not speaking to one another. There's no greater sound than the silence of lovers not talking to one another. And it is so relative, right? It's not about being with one another physically, but it's about being somewhere with your entire being. And this is one of the foundational teachings of Chassidus. The fifth Chabad Rebbe teaches, someone asked him, what is a chassid? So he's famous for saying a chassid is a lamplighter, but he also said in another occasion that a chassid is a pnimi. And a pnimi. Pnimi means an internal person. To be pnimiut, like panim is our face because it shows our pnimiut. It means a chassid is a pnimi. So what does that mean, an internal person? It doesn't mean what we think it means, just to be real, right, and honest. It means that wherever he says, it means whatever he's doing, he's there with all of his being. And that's what it means to be real and honest, right? It doesn't just mean, well, a chassid is a real person inside and out the same, right? That his outside reflects his inside. It means that wherever he is, he's there 100%. Because if he's not, then he's being dishonest, right? He's saying, I'm here, but I'm not really here. And it's not being authentic. And he says being a pnimi means that wherever you're doing it 100%, and you're only doing that thing and nothing else. Your mind is not somewhere else. And for me, having ADHD and, like, naturally wanting to multitask, it's something that was very hard for me to come to understand, because it feels like such a waste of time, right? To be walking to the shir, driving and not being able to, answer a bunch of messages, right? Or respond to a bunch of people, or send a message that I have to cut things off my list. So at first I thought this only applies to, like, important things, right? Only be a pnimi if you're connecting with somebody, with your family member, with someone you love, when you're giving a shiur, when you're learning. But if you're doing mundane things like washing the dishes, right, or making your bed, then you don't have to be fully engrossed in that. But actually he says that even in the most mundane things, being there 100% is the most important thing, because only every single moment, right? We learned this in another issue, that every moment has a center, right? That we don't get to decide which moment is more valuable, that I have to be there presently and fully there. So if I'm doing something even mundane, right? I could be listening to a shir at the same time, but I could, when that's okay. But there's certain times when we need to just be involved in what we're doing 100% and be focused and be present. And that helps us to then be focused and present and doing the next thing that we're going to be doing that's important, right? And then if we're washing our dishes or driving somewhere to a shiur, right? And in the meanwhile, I'm sending a bunch of messages, then when you get to that space, you're also going to be all over the place. But if you're just focused and centered and present in the drive, right? And just looking around and noticing your body and your breath, right? And feeling your state of consciousness and taking a few deep breaths and just noticing how you're feeling, then when you get there, you're so much more present and whole. And you're a whole person where you are. So this message of this Parsha of Ki Tavo is an invaluable message to teach us that you've only really gotten to a place if every single part of you is there, and you've only really acquired Eretz Yisrael once you've only really landed in Eretz Yisrael once once you've conquered it, once you've established, and once every single other person, right? Once you've looked down and made sure that everyone else is established as well. That's when you've acquired and conquered Eretz Yisrael. And that's when the mitzvah Bikurim applies. And how does that connect to Bikurim? Take them out. That really, the only way that's gratitude happens when we're stopping and we're noticing things, right? When we're doing two things at once, when I'm talking to my spouse, but I'm also on my phone playing a game, right? Which seems like sometimes it's good for like anxiety or calming, but we just miss so much, right? If we're watching our kids and we're doing something else at the same time, even if it's cleaning, not to say that you should never do that, you end up missing things. You end up missing those moments. And those moments of gratitude are those moments that you're grateful for. When you're just present and you're just noticing, even if you're in the drive, right, and you're taking a drive and you're not doing anything else, you suddenly notice how much you have to be grateful for. You notice your breath, you notice your health, you notice you notice that I'm living in Eretz Yisrael and I'm driving here in the streets of Eretz Yisrael, right? You notice so much and you have so much more gratitude. So Bikurim applies only after you've entered Eretz Yisrael in two levels. It says that we can only have that true. Bikurim doesn't apply out of Eretz Yisrael because that spiritual sensitivity to always be constantly aware of the blessings we have from Hashem can only be happened in Eretz Yisrael. Because only in Eretz Yisrael are we much more attuned to the source of our chayas, right? Because we're one step closer to the source of everything, right? There's more levels of coverings of tzimtzumim outside of Eretz Yisrael. So only in Eretz Yisrael, but that doesn't mean that you made aliyah and now you're on a higher level. Now you're suddenly attuned. Now you're more spiritual. You made aliyah. You're spiritual. You're a better person. You're on a higher level. It doesn't work like that at all. You don't just move to Israel and then suddenly make aliyah and suddenly you're on this higher level and you're on this level of bikurim, right? That's what this Torah is telling us. You don't just get to move to Israel and then suddenly be like, I'm on a higher level now, right? I've gotten there. It takes a lot of work, right? It takes a lot of internalizing and it takes being present in receiving that, right? So we have to enter Eretz Yisrael and allow Eretz Yisrael to enter us as well. That's really, really profound, right? Entering Eretz Yisrael means also, and to allow Eretz Yisrael to enter us means just being aware and present and seeing the differences in Eretz Yisrael and seeing the Kedusha here. Because I know so many people who come here and they don't feel a single thing different. And I'm like, how do you not feel it, right? And if you're not open to it or looking to feel that, right? Not everyone's going to feel that there's a different level of Kedusha, a different level of connection, a different air quality, right? A different godly energy coming through here. Not everyone is going to feel it. So it's not an automatic aliyah that you move here and you're on a higher spiritual level. You really need to allow Eretz Yisrael to enter you. And to do that, you need to be tavo. You have to realize that you have to be present in every step you take is a mitzvah, right? Why is that so important? To say that don't do anything else. You're walking in Eretz Yisrael. Just don't have a phone conversation now. Just appreciate the fact that you're taking a step in Eretz Yisrael. And what that means, right? It means that you're in this land that Hashem chose for you and how much hashgacha Hashem has in your life and allows you to just open yourself up to so much gratitude. And we know that the number one key to happiness and to inner contentment is gratitude, right? The shift, right? You can have somebody who has the same exact incredible life, but if they're not able to see the gifts that they have, they're going to be so unhappy, right? If they're on social media all day and they see how much everyone else has, they're going to be so miserable. But if they disconnect from social media and are able to be focused in every moment and just notice the tiniest things that they have, right? I'm not in pain right now, right? I'm able to walk pain-free, right? And yesterday I had pain and now I'm not, right? And to notice that every breath I take, I'm breathing, right? I'm alive. I have family. I have a home to live in. I have something to eat, right? Hashem, I have this gift of Torah. I have meaning in my life. When we can go through that, we can have so much more joy and real joy in our lives, right? And the key to joy is gratitude, and the key to gratitude is being present. And this Torah really gives us the key to utilize Eretz Yisrael and to receive Eretz Yisrael and not just to be there geographically from this words of Ki Tavo. Especially with our spouse in our relationships, when we're present and we're there 100%, that's when we notice all the things about our spouse, all the amazing things about them. And when we're distracted and we just see all the annoying things and things they're not doing, I think we have to turn the mirror back on ourselves and say, well, am I present and really noticing all the incredible qualities that they do have, right? Or am I just so distracted that the only things that stick out at me are the things that they're not doing, right? Because that's natural. If I'm distracted, the only things I'm going to see are when things go wrong. But if I'm present, I'm going to notice everything that is right. And it really takes us to transform us to an entirely different level. And this is actually reflected in a halacha where it's brought down in the Chamim teach us in Baba Basra that a person who gives a coin to a poor person is granted 6 brachos, 6 blessings, and someone who gratifies him is blessed 11-fold. Now, what does that mean? So gratifies him, you might think he gives him more money until he's like, right, until the person's grateful, right? He gives him, sustains him more. But actually, they explain that they don't give him any more money, that it's the same exact person giving 1 coin to the same pauper. But if he gives it with gratitude, if he gratifies a person and gives it with graciousness, with a smile and a thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to give tzedakah, and you enabled me to do this mitzvah. And if he gives it in that way, then this, for the same exact coin, he is blessed 11-fold than what he would have given if it was just one coin. And it teaches us so much about the quality and not just the quantity of how much I'm physically here, how much time I'm spending with you, but if I can spend the same time with you. And that's actually in the list, is not here today, but last year she told me that somebody who teaches that the 5 love languages, even more than all of the 5 love languages, is giving that love language in a different way, with being fully present, with graciousness, with being fully there. Because you can give someone a million gifts, and even if that's their love language, but it won't have the same effect as if you give it with intention, with love, with like, I bought this for you because I was thinking about you, right? I can get something from a snack for my kid, or like a treat, and just be like, here, I got you a treat. Or I can say, I was thinking about you today, and I know that you love this, and I love you so much, and you were so special to me, and I wanted to get you something special because you're so special to me. And you could be the exact same thing, but it's 11-fold, right? More valuable when you're giving it with all of yourself. And that goes for every single interaction that we have. It's not about the quantity of how much we're giving or how much time, even quality time can be hours of spending time together. But when we're just like aimlessly like going in circles, right, or watching a movie together, right, that you can watch 4 hours of a movie together, or you can spend 10 minutes just truly listening and connecting and appreciating one another, and it's infinitely different, right? And we can have the same, all that goes for all the 5 love languages, for giving a gift, for doing an act of service, right? I can make someone a coffee and be like, hey, it's on the table, or my son could give it to me with a huge smile and like a little heart note and say, I love you, mama, right? And it means so much more when you do an act of service for somebody with your whole heart and say, I love you, so I know this is important to you, so I did this for you, right? And also for words of appreciation, right? You could just be like, thanks so much, or you can say, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you as a person and how special you are, and just I'm noticing just things about you and just how amazing you are, and I just want you to know that it touched me. We can give the same thing, and it can even take the same amount of time, but if we really are there, it can have tremendous impact in every single connection in our lives. So now in Elul, we learned that Ki Tavo is also a promise that all of us will enter Eretz Yisrael. So Ki Tavo has a lot of meanings, right? It's saying that only once we've done the Ki Seitze, which is the backwards, right? First, we have to leave and come down to the world, do the hard work of conquering, right? Because Ki Seitze was Tel Milchama, do the war, and only then, once we've conquered it, then Ki Tavo, then we can fully be there. And then when we have Eretz Yisrael, we appreciate it. Then when we return, when our neshama, right, it finishes its life or finishes its mission, only when we've done that battle, right, then we Ki Tavo, then we feel we've gotten there and we're there fully present, right? And we're there with all of our being. And when Mashiach comes as well, we say Ki Tavo is also a promise that Hashem is saying Ki, not if Tavo, when every single Jew enters Eretz Yisrael and conquers and inherits every single part of Eretz Yisrael. May it happen speedily, very, very soon in our days. Does anyone want to add anything? We once did this and it was so life-changing for me, and I wish I had a reminder on my phone, but if you can set a reminder on your phone at a random time of the day, maybe it's when you're walking or just doing something mundane, and put a timer for 2 minutes after that, and whatever you're doing then, just do that only for 2 minutes, right? And obviously we know about mindfulness, like if you're wandering to other things, that's okay. Just be like, okay, notice what you're wandering to, and then try to focus back on what you're doing. So if you're washing the dishes, on being present in the dishes that you're washing, on the feeling of the water, on the temperature, on the sensations that you're feeling, on the different sensations that you're feeling in your body. If you're taking a walk, just to notice how the air feels on your body. It is so healing. It is, and mindfulness begins like in the Torah. It's like the most, to be grounded and connected to what you're doing is therapeutic. And if you practice it for 2 minutes a day, it becomes a muscle that you activate, and then you can practice it in so many other areas. And just because naturally we want to, especially for someone with ADHD, you want to be doing as many things at once as we could. And as women especially, that's how we're programmed to do, right? Because we're moms and we're working and we're wives and we're doing so much at the same time. And not to say that that's an asset, but there is times that sometimes you need to be doing a lot of things at once, but sometimes you don't. And what I've learned is that multitasking is not actually a real thing, that you're really just switching back and forth really quickly, and you're exhausting yourself. And you're basically doing each task less efficiently than if you would have divided it. And studies have shown that if you would have done each thing separately, you actually would have got done more faster, even though you think you're getting things done faster. Not always does that work that way, great? Because sometimes you're washing dishes, you want to listen to a shiur, right? That's okay, but there is such a value to putting a timer and starting at 2 minutes a day, and then increasing it to 3 minutes a day, to just being 100% in what you're doing, right? I always talk about my Waze. I practice it with my Waze app. By the way, hi to everyone who's watching live and afterwards. I have a Waze app called Headspace, right? Headspace is an app for mindfulness, and I have it on my Waze, and every time I go somewhere, even if I know where I'm going, I put on Headspace because it reminds me. It says, like, take a minute to notice your surroundings, to feel the seat beneath you, and throughout the journey, every time there's traffic or there's a police or there's a speed camera, it like helps you focus on like where you are, on being grounded, on how you're feeling, on the feel of the steering wheel, on noticing what's outside the car, on noticing things that you don't usually. And it literally is transformative. And I always said, if I could have like a headspace in my ear all day being like, you know, now's a good time to take a deep breath. It tells you to take a deep breath. Now's a good time to like notice something you haven't noticed before. It's just amazing. But it really has taught me like the value of maybe not having to do two things at once, and being able to just do what you're doing, and how invaluable that is, and just being there, and how that translates into so many other areas of our life. And it's obviously tremendous mental health, because instead of always being nervous for what's going to come, to just be able to be just be calm and say, well, right now I'm okay, right? For anyone who suffered from anxiety or depression or panic or fear, there's so much of it all comes from being so worried and feeling like the world is ending. But when you could stop and take a deep breath and be like, well, right now I'm washing the dishes and I'm okay, right? And everything's going to be, and then it gives you a feeling of safety of like, oh, like even though right now I feel like the world is ending, and when you recenter and refocus, you're like, well, actually I'm okay, right? Right now I'm walking, I'm breathing, I'm okay. And it's not as scary as, you know, that's not actually as real as it might feel. What is real is where I am right now. So it really is such a value in mental health. This like, and I love that this idea of mindfulness is just in the Torah over and over and over again, right? Like Moshe Rabbeinu, like you were saying, Shal na'alecha mal ragacha, right? Notice the ground that you're on. Hashem told Moshe, take your shoes off your feet and just notice that where you are right now is holy, is perfect, and you're in exactly the space you're meant to be, right? So constantly stop and be like, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I don't need to be anywhere else. Hashem put me here where I am, and I just have to notice and be present and feel grounded and safe, that wherever I am right now is exactly where Hashem wants for me to be. And someone I'm close to went to seminary now, and they took in another country, and they took away their phones. They only gave them dumb phones. They took away their smartphones. And she cried for like the first few days because she never felt so alone. Because even though she has like friends there, but you feel so alone without your phone, and it's terrifying, and you're left with your feelings, and you have to acknowledge what you're feeling, and it's so scary. It's very terrifying. It's not as simple, right? To be present, to be fully there. I remember when there was a blackout in Efrat and it's a gun, and there was no Wi-Fi. I was like, what do I do now? Like, I don't have my phone to charge it. I don't have anything to do. Like, I was like, and what do I do now? It's like, do I have a book? Like, what do I use to distract and like not be present with my feelings, right? It's a lot to like take deep breaths. It's a lot of work.
It's also a big present to be.
It's a gift, yeah.
It's a gift, yes, to be present with your heart feelings.
With your heart feelings.
So it's beautiful.
What?
It's beautiful.
I know. Sometimes I'm like, it's the only time I get to be with my feelings is like Friday night, and I'm in my bed, right? And it's just like there's no light to read, and I'm like, oh wow, like now I get to actually like go inside and feel things. Right, and it's such a gift, and it's also scary, right? It's you don't necessarily, but shifting the fear to bikurim, which is gratitude, is very helpful, right? Like, because we spiral to a lot of fears about the unknown, but what we do know is how much we have to be grateful for, and when we notice that, it's very grounding, right? When we see the things that we have, it's very grounding, and it's saying, yes, those things are scary, but I have a base to the basket, right? To be centered on. Thanks. Pleasure. Oh, I wanted to connect it to mikvah. Anyone who has to go could go, but I heard. This is actually taught from mikvah, because it says that the word tavo, alamayim, is again tavo, coming somewhere, and water, the idea of being fully embraced. Also, I'm a Kabbalah teacher, so I was just teaching this to Kabbalah yesterday. It's just so deep that there's also a deeper message that when you're in the water and every single part of you is there, there's very few mitzvahs that you're doing with your entire being, right? Most mitzvahs we do with one part of our body, with our nose, with our mind, right, with our mouth. There's only 3 mitzvahs that we do with every part of us, right? Fully submerged. Actually, one I heard is taking a step in Eretz Yisrael, because you're doing that when you walk in Eretz Yisrael or being in Eretz Yisrael. One is sukkah, which is coming up upon us. One is talis, which only applies to men, and one is mikvah. And the mikvah is the most, because you're not just surrounded by it, but you're actually, it's in a pneumius way. The water encompasses it gets into every single part of you, right? Whereas something else might be distant and surrounding, like a sukkah. The mikvah is an embrace of every single part of us, and it's just like the sukkah, which we'll learn about soon, is like the embrace from Hashem, saying that, you know, the front of you, the back of you, all of it is beloved, and all of it is precious to me, equally, right? And we don't tell my kid, you know, I love your face, but the back of your head, a little less, right? Like, I love my child, all of them, fully. And the mikvah is such an important time for us to notice and to go into the water and to say, Hashem wants every single part of me in the water, right? Every single hair of mine is precious to Hashem. And this is like, and the mitzvah is only complete, and the connection to Hashem is not, if a part of me isn't there, right? It's something's missing from there, right? If I'm connecting with my spouse, it's not just supposed to be a body connection, right? We want their heart, we want their body, their mind and soul. That's the true oneness. And the mikvah is Hashem's way, and especially for all of us women who, I think there's not one woman I know that doesn't struggle with her body image and feeling less than, because there's no such, you can't ever have a perfect body image when you look at fake bodies that aren't real, right? That are digitally, Sounds like I'm like a hate technology person. I use technology all the time, right? We're using it to broadcast. Technology has great things, but it also has some painful things, right? So no one can have the perfect body image, but stepping in the mikvah is Hashem saying, take off your makeup, right? Take off everything that you put on to feel, to cover up. Let's say literally cover up and makeup and the things you use to cover up things that you don't like about yourself. And I want you to remove all that and come into the mikvah as you are, without anything blocking you, without any of those personas you have to put on, even like smiling to the world, right? And like putting on like a nice face. You could just be as you are, naked physically and naked emotionally, and just be completely you without anything and walk into the waters. And I want you to know that every single part of you, right? Ki Tavo has to be, every inch of you is beloved and precious and embraced by me, front and back, right? If it's not like your front is more important than your back. Every single part of you is precious exactly as you are. So like the meditation that I teach, that I like to incorporate in the mikvah, is like to know that, Hashem, and that's my body is perfect to Hashem, and it's exactly, Hashem made it exactly the way that he intended, not any different, and it's perfect and beautiful to Hashem as I am, right? Without having to cover up anything in my body. And it's just really Hashem's reminder to us of like what it means to fully be loved and this concept of Ki Tavo is to extend that full embrace to ourselves and to extend that full love and say, if Hashem loves me as I am, and Hashem's expectations are obviously, we know Hashem's expectations of us, then I could for sure, love myself as I am, my body and every part of me, and learn to embrace myself, and then extend that to people outside of us, right? To be able to fully embrace an entire person, and not just the good sides and bad sides of our children, right? To accept our children as they are, the same way that we hope that we said last week that a parent's forgiveness or an acceptance is the key. Anyways, it all ties full circle. Yeah, T-shirt.
We didn't get your name.
Yeah, self-worth is very low. Okay, I'm just going to end the live. Thanks everyone for joining. See you next time.